I believe calling it a surprise is a very gentle way to describe what exactly happens in today's gospel reading. Today's text is a very, very hard one. And it's hard because it shows us a Jesus that is acting very out of character. How can the all-loving, incarnate Son of God call a woman in such great need a dog? There are many ways that people try to soften this text. Some point out that the Greek word Jesus uses here is the diminutive form of the word dog. So for those of you who speak Spanish, it would be like adding ito to the end of a word to make it small. So really, Jesus is just calling her a cute little puppy. So their interaction really isn't that bad. Others say that this is simply a test of faith, that Jesus called her a dog to see if she would back down. But instead, she persisted. And for that reason, her daughter is healed. And then there are those who try to really lean into the human side of Jesus, since we as Christians believe Jesus to be both fully human and fully divine. And they say that human Jesus was just tired, maybe a little cranky, maybe a little crotchety, and didn't say something nice. Some even take it a step further to say that Jesus was also a product of his upbringing, and that he may even had some racism towards this woman, and that this woman had to then teach him how not to be racist. This, of course, brings up a lot of issues of what it means to be sinless and perfect, because I just can't believe that a created being would have to teach the Creator not to be racist. All of these interpretations open up their own can of worms and make the text difficult in other ways. And they are all attempts to try and either soften something that is disturbing or try to find a way to maybe gloss over the things that make us uncomfortable. However, I don't think that we have to shy away from how uncomfortable this text makes us. I don't think we need to try and put it in a box or make it behave. This text is disturbing, and it should disturb us. Jesus' actions in this text do not seem to reflect what we have come to learn about him this far into his ministry. When we read these two passages together, the first being about what makes a person unclean, which means to be unfit for worshiping God, and the second being about the faith of this Canaanite woman, the only people present in both of these stories are Jesus and his disciples. So for that reason, I am led to believe that what the disciples are supposed to have learned in the first passage is supposed to inform how they're going to act in the second passage. That is to say, Jesus has given them a lesson in theory in the classroom and is now going to take them out in the field to put it into practice. This passage starts out with Jesus back in his home country. He is healing people, casting out demons, little Jesus things, super casual. And then the Pharisees and the scribes, the people who dedicate themselves to reading the Hebrew Scriptures, so the religious elite, the proud theologians, come all the way down from Jerusalem, which is God's holy city, not to address the miracles that are happening in their own backyard, but instead to nitpick Jesus over his failure to make sure that his disciples are washing their hands before they eat. Something that seems rather trivial when you kind of hold it together with Jesus healing people and casting out demons. Talk about missing the forest for the trees. So after Jesus graciously and generously chews out the Pharisees, he then explains to his disciples that it is not what comes from the outside that makes a person ceremoniously unclean, which again is to say unfit to worship God, but it is instead what comes out of the inside of a person, the intentions and thoughts and things in their hearts. This is what makes a person unclean and unfit to worship God. So, Jesus packs up the disciples, and they leave, and they go into the Gentile countryside, and are immediately approached by what? Someone from the outside. An outsider. Someone that good Jewish boys are to have nothing to do with. A Canaanite woman. But what exactly is a Canaanite? It is believed that the Gospel of Matthew is written to an audience of Jewish Christians. The reason why this matters is because the early Jewish people had a very specific relationship with the Canaanites. They hated them. These Canaanites were the hostile original inhabitants of the Promised Land, or what was originally called the land of Canaan, Canaanites. And the Israelites warred with them constantly throughout their early history. So, needless to say, they had some beef. So when the original audience, having this text read to them, hear the word Canaanites, all these years of fighting and animosity and prejudice and hate are going to come up immediately to the surface. Why is this Canaanite woman approaching the Messiah? This woman isn't just an outsider. Matthew is depicting her as an enemy. However, Jesus comes into her neighborhood. And upon his arrival, this woman frantically finds him and demands healing for her daughter. The text doesn't tell us if she has a husband or a family, but for a Gentile woman to be approaching a Jewish rabbi, particularly one who must have had a huge reputation for her, a Canaanite, to even know who he is, leads me to believe that there are not many people in her corner to advocate for her. And if that's the case, who did she leave to attend her demon-possessed daughter? The text tells us that her daughter is in a terrible way. Different translations put it like this, that she is cruelly possessed by demons. She is suffering terribly. She is severely oppressed. So for this woman and her daughter, for her to leave her to go approach this man, shows us that the situation is, in fact, dire. And this woman believes so much in Jesus' healing power that she puts herself in a position of extreme humility to come and beg Jesus for healing, calling him both Lord and Son of David, a messianic title that wouldn't mean anything to a Canaanite woman. And where are Jesus' disciples in the midst of all of this? They are begging him to send her away. They don't have compassion for her. They don't care about her plight. They're not even moved by the fact that this outsider, their perceived enemy, this foreign woman, is calling out to Jesus not only with such great desperation, but with such a clear understanding of who he is and what he is capable of doing. Instead, they say, Jesus, would you please, for the love of all that is good and holy, get rid of this woman? She won't leave us alone. She keeps shouting after us. She's being, quite frankly, a little bit annoying. Please send her away. I find this phrase, send her away, to be significant to our understanding of this text. Just a chapter before, Jesus is in the wilderness trying to get a little R&R and sees a large crowd in need of healing and exorcisms and teaching. And Jesus sees them and has compassion for them. He stops what he's doing and takes care of them and ministers to them. And he does this all throughout the day, and once it gets late and everyone starts to get hungry, the disciples approach Jesus and say, "What? Send them away." Jesus had compassion on them. The disciples had had enough. Send them away. Of course, in this story, Jesus doesn't. Instead, he challenges them and says, "You give them something to eat. Don't send them away. You do something." So here we are, one whole singular chapter later, and it is clear that the disciples didn't understand what they were called to do then when it came to feeding the 5,000. And it's clear that they didn't understand Jesus' teachings about what makes a person unfit for worship. So I think in this moment, Jesus, in his frustration, not with the woman, but with his disciples, decides to show them what's going to happen if he tries to do it their way. You want me to tell her to go away? Fine. Let's see what happens. He says out loud what the disciples are secretly thinking in their hearts. Go away, dog. We have nothing for you. It's what the disciples are thinking. It's what the Pharisees would have thought. It's what anybody in this original audience would have been thinking in their minds right to believe about this woman. Go away, dog. How dehumanizing. This kind of callousness and indifference to someone in need just because they are an outsider is troubling. It is disturbing. And what happens to this woman and her daughter when Jesus says these words? Nothing. Their problem doesn't go away. Their need is still there. She's still at the gates begging to be let in to receive healing. And ultimately, despite the disciples' hardness of heart, Jesus acts. Jesus not only restores this woman's daughter to health, but then goes on to commend her faith, not the disciples. What this Canaanite woman shows us is that God is going to take care of those on the outside, whether we decide we're going to participate in God's goodness or not. God is a God of the outsider, of the oppressed, and of the marginalized. What the disciples then missed was an opportunity to be a part of something greater than themselves, to be a part of healing work, to be a part of reconciliation work, to be a part of good work. It is not the outsider that is going to make you unfit for worship, but it is instead your treatment of them. What the disciples missed, really, in this moment, was an opportunity to participate in true worship. The reason why it matters so much that we acknowledge that Matthew's gospel is written to Jewish Christians is that doing so reminds us that it is written to the people who are supposed to be on the inside. The Jewish people were God's chosen people. They were the first ones to receive the scriptures. They're the first one that Jesus decided to reveal himself to. These are supposed to be the people who get it. And the message for us today is that those of us within these walls are the insiders. We're supposed to be the ones who get it. And nobody was more in the supposed in-group than the disciples themselves, the men who spent 3 years following and eating with and studying the words of Jesus. And here they get it wrong. And we know eventually, with hindsight, if we skip to the ending, that the disciples do eventually get it right. If they didn't develop the same heart for the needy and the oppressed and the marginalized and the outsider that Jesus had and still today has, I don't believe that the Christian movement would have survived after Jesus' death. The disciples eventually do get it right. This passage is a snapshot into their growth as followers of Jesus. And I think these feelings of discomfort that we get when we read it are supposed to motivate us to do the same thing. We have to grow. And so this text poses a challenge to us. What are we going to do? Are we going to tell Jesus to send those in need away? Or are we going to give them something to eat? Amen.